Today's episode is brought to you by Mazars. SoundCartel. From SoundCartel, I'm Nicole Goodman, and this is Business Essentials Daily. It happens all too often that companies ignore the valuable contribution from their human resources department. If you're going to have HR, then use it wisely, insists Karen Gately, founder and CEO of Corporate Dojo. After all, she says, HR is crucial in empowering your most important asset, your people. Karen explains to Chris Ashmore why HR is not as influential as it should be.
I think there's a lot of wasted money invested in HR departments that aren't making enough of a difference. And I want to be really clear in saying that that is not always because the HR people are not capable. I think there's a broad range of reasons as to why HR struggles to make a real difference. And it obviously is a reflection of their own capabilities. But it's also about how the business positions that role, what their mandate fundamentally is in the business, and how ready the business is to actually genuinely take on board advice and to leverage the HR professionals they have in their business. So in my mind, if we're going to invest in HR, like any job in a business, let's make sure that it's actually having optimal impact on the outcomes.
So what are some of the mistakes do you see business owners make when it comes to their HR team?
I think the biggest one is expecting that HR is going to come in and do managers' jobs for them. You know, I often will hear leaders say, oh, we'll just get an HR person in and they can deal with all of these issues. They can have all of these tough conversations. We will just get HR in. The simple truth is most human beings don't want, for example, feedback from the HR department. They actually want to have those conversations directly with their own manager. So I think that's probably the starting point is what do we actually expect the HR person's role to be? Then what I find is there's a misalignment between what the organisation wants to achieve through their HR role and the professional that they've actually brought into the business. So whether that's the level of experience they've got or expertise in particular areas. So I think we need to be really targeted around, okay, what outcomes do we want? And then what's that going to actually look like in the person that we bring into our business?
In terms of structure and hierarchy, where should HR sit within the company?
Again, it's going to depend on the level of capability of the person. But if we are bringing in an HR manager and our objective is for that person to influence organisational performance through our people, then there's a lot of room to argue that they should be sitting at the leadership table. I think, you know, if they're not a peer of the leadership team, then it can be incredibly difficult for them to influence in the ways that they need to. But obviously that's going to depend on whether or not you've brought in an entry-level HR person that is fundamentally there to coordinate your processes and to manage your administration. If that's the case, then obviously they can be reporting into another more senior leader. But in my mind, HR has the biggest influence when they are actually at that leadership table and able to influence the quality of conversation that the leadership team are having about people and what our strategies are to make sure we've got the right talent and then we're effectively leveraging that talent towards achieving our vision and our strategy.
What makes a good HR team?
I think obviously there is HR specialist capabilities, which obviously we can talk about. But the starting one in my experience is actually having commercial nous. Often the complaint that leaders make about HR is that their advice or their strategies are disconnected from what the business is fundamentally trying to achieve. So I think HR people need to understand the business that they're working in, understand what success of the organisation looks like, and then the ability to actually come up with the HR strategies that are going to support those commercial outcomes. So you need to understand the business's numbers, you need to understand the market, you need to understand the key drivers of the organisation's performance, and then you need to be able to fit the people part of the equation to that. Then I would say one of the most important capabilities is being influential. We need to help leaders to understand why the strategies that are being recommended are going to be a dial turner in terms of the business results. And sometimes, leaders don't want to follow HR's advice because it's inconvenient. It's easier just to say, oh, I'll just keep going the way I'm going. So in that case, again, HR people need to be able to build trust and respect in their relationships and earn that reputation for being a trusted advisor so that leaders want to listen to their advice. And if I look to one thing that defines an HR person's success, it's that the leadership team want them at the table. They want them in the conversation as they're trying to work through people challenges or determine the right strategies around talent management, whatever it is, that they don't want to have those conversations or make those decisions until they've actually engaged their HR manager or colleague.
What professional capabilities should HR have?
So, beyond the commercial acumen, as we've been talking about, I think it's absolutely about having good understanding. If you look at the employee life cycle, so everything from how do we go and find people in the marketplace, how do we attract them to our business to make sure that we're able to get the best in our industry and bring them into our organisation. Then how do we leverage that talent once it's actually in the business? How do we ensure that people are engaged and passionate about what they're doing, growing their capabilities, as the organisation's demands grow and change, that the talent pool within the business is also evolving. Critically, how do we retain our people because they love working for this organisation and feel like they're going places with us? Each of those steps along the employee life cycle, HR people need to have obviously technical capabilities to be able to guide the leadership team and to make good decisions.
When it comes to hiring for an HR position, what should the business owner or the leader be asking that potential hire?
I think it starts with understanding the job first. Too often we just go to market and say, I need an HR person. Well, what does that actually mean? What mandate do we want to give this person? What influence do we want them to have? What decisions do we want them to own? Once we understand the outcome we want to achieve, then we need to understand, well, what are the capabilities that this person needs to be able to bring? Then we're in a position to actually ask questions that help us to explore that accurately. So some of the things that I would say is we want to be asking questions that help us to understand prior experience. So tell me about a time when. And I would focus in on some of the trickier parts of what HR people have to deal with. So tell me about a time when you have supported a manager through a scenario where they've got a poor performing or behaving team member. What advice did you give? What process did you follow? What was the outcome? And so obviously we're listening for, did this person bring attitudes and behaviours aligned with our own values? Because obviously one of the big things that HR needs to be able to do is to influence the type of culture we want in our business. So does this person bring a pragmatic mindset? Are they commercial? Are they ethical? Do they have compassion? Do they have a healthy balance between focusing on managing risk as well as enabling commercial results? And I think if I had to give one piece of advice around what you need to be listening for and observing is, does this HR person have emotional intelligence? Because if they don't have emotional intelligence, it's unlikely to work out. And what I mean by that is the ideal HR person has a high degree of self-awareness, they have a high degree of empathy, and they are able to deliberately manage their own emotion, manage their own conduct in ways that have a positive impact on their relationships. So HR people need to build strong relationships with not only the leaders, but the team as well. And in order to do that, again, I think emotional intelligence is a critically important skill or capability. So in each step of the hiring process, we need to be assessing, is this person culturally aligned? Do they have emotional intelligence? And do they have the professional capabilities in the areas that we really need them to?
And if I can flip it around, if a company is looking for the best potential HR team or manager, a good HR person will want to also join a great company. What kind of company is a good HR person looking to join?
I think fundamentally HR people want to work in an organisation or with a leadership team who are actually serious about leveraging the full potential of human beings to optimise business results. So sometimes leaders bring in HR because we just want you to process pays, deal with staff complaints, do the administrative parts of the role. And there's plenty of that. Even just managing a recruitment process can be really administratively heavy or burdensome. So I think HR people who are passionate about the profession want to know that the business results are being impacted and they're able to do that. So they're going to be looking for an employer who's willing to go on the journey, who's actually willing to implement the advice. And obviously not just blindly, we need to obviously use our own critical thinking, but organisations that say, we care about our people and we want to drive human performance, but then we don't actually want to take on board any advice because it's too hard or it's too confronting or it's inconvenient or whatever it is, that's when the HR job gets especially difficult. So if you're going to bring HR into your business, be ready for it and at least be willing to learn and have an open mind and to be influenced by that HR professional that you bring in.
That was CEO of Corporate Dojo, Karen Gately. Business Essentials Daily is a SoundCartel podcast. Producers are Nick Schildberger, Chris Ashmore, Jeff Waters and myself. Technical production by Pete Letts. I'm Nicole Goodman. Thanks for listening. We'll bring you more Be Daily next week. SoundCartel. This episode was brought to you by Mazars. To find out more, visit mazars.com.au. That's mazars.com.au.